This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we're recording. Shall we start now? Okay, well, fine. Well, first, good afternoon and welcome everybody, and thank you very much for your assistance. First of all, we are ReTraCE. ReTraCE is an innovative training network funded by the European Commission under the Marie Sklodowska-Curie program. Our network consists of 14 early-stage researchers and diverse European institutions, universities, businesses, and NGOs. And the focus of ReTraCE is to help realizing the transition towards the circular economy through academic research to build a circular and sustainable future for the European Union. And 14 of us have been contributing to this goal through our research. And today we have the opportunity to present the last publications of our ESRs. The speakers today will be Mariana Oliveira from the Parthenope University in Naples, Sanja Arsova from the Southeast European Research Center in Thessaloniki, and Tommaso Calzolari from the University of Sheffield. And yeah, Mariana will present us her research called Circular Economy in the Agro-Industry, Integrated Environmental Assessment of Dairy Products. In her paper, Mariana will discuss the relevance of bio-circular strategies to decrease the environmental pressure of the dairy sector. In her research, Mariana applied the life cycle assessment and emergency accounting applied framework, LEAF in short, and to understand and measure the burdens of dairy production chain. And next, Sanja Arsova will present two publications. The first one is the EU Green Deal, Spreading or Concentrating Prosperity. This paper critically evaluates the European Union's Green Deal and its potential to alleviate regional disparities, as well as the challenging task of addressing development issues along with environmental concerns. And the second paper of Sanja will present is called Implementing Regional Circularity Economy Policies, a proposed living constellation of stakeholders. And this conceptual paper identifies an inclusive and permanent coalition of stakeholders to act as a living constellation in the process of the circular economy implementation. The paper also provides a method of designing platforms to ensure inclusivity and stakeholder engagement throughout the transitioning process at the regional level. And last but not least, Tommaso Calzolari will present us his new publication, The Adoption of Circular Economy Practices in Supply Chains, an assessment of European multinational enterprises. And in his research, Tommaso's paper assesses the circular economy inspired initiatives promoted by the largest European multinational enterprises across 4 industrial sectors. Also, institutional pressures and supply chain integration are measured to explore their role in shaping the transition towards the adoption of circular economy practices in global supply chains. So, well, first, thank you very much, Tommaso, Mary, and Sanja for your research, and congratulations for the publications. And Mariana, if you want to go first, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm sharing my screen. I hope so. Wait a minute. Can you see it? Yes. Okay. Yes, I can't because I have this window of the. How can I change it? Oh yeah, here. I don't know how to do it. Okay, this one also here. Oh, nice, nice. So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad and I'm proud to present to you my second publication with Annalisa Cocozza, that is a master's student of our group, Dr. Zuccaro, Dr. Stentagata, and Professor Uggiati. It is about an integrated environmental assessment of dairy products titled Circular Economy in the Agro-Industry. So without any further ado, our aim was to improve the integration between life cycle analysis and Emergy accounting within the LIAF procedure, that is LCA and EMA applied framework, through biocircular economy strategies to evaluate the agro-industry in a multidimensional perspective, suggesting viable solutions towards sustainability. In this study, we evaluated the buffalo mozzarella in Campania region and in Italy, and with twofold perspective. On the one hand, evaluating the environmental performance of the production chain, and on the other hand, suggesting methodological improvements for the integration between LCA and integration of LCA and EMA procedure. So I hope you do remember the methods. We talked a lot, but the first one is EMA, Emergy accounting, that considers the biosphere work needed for resource generation, and also accounts for the indirect environmental support embodied in human labor and services. So it brings the environmental perspective. LCA, on the other hand, accounts for matter and energy flows occurring under the human control. In other words, simple words, EMA offers information about the cost in terms of resource consumption, as environmental support needed to production, sustainability, renewability of the process. And LCA shows, in a simple way, the pollution generated by the evaluated process. In our literature review, as single methods, there are several studies highlighting for LCA greenhouse gases emissions and other pollutants generation in dairy production. And EMA always included in a multi-criteria analysis to support decision making. The first attempts of the integration between LCA and EMA were around 2013-14, when Rauj et al. And Marvul et al. Point out the necessity to evaluate process and products from the resources consumption perspective, accounting for the work of the nature to produce them. But the integration faced criticism during the EMA uncertainty of data used and its lack of standardization. However, LCA and EMA share similarities on their evaluation procedures. So they both use inventory data, calculation of indicators, and results interpretations. Here you can see a table of an Emergy calculation, this scenario from the scenario 1 of our study, just for example, just to give you an example. So life cycle analysis inventory accounts for the imported inputs, inputs from the market, while Emergy accounts for the renewable inputs, and also, as I told you before, the indirect natural work embodied on labor and services here in the bottom. So EMA improves LCA assessments by quantifying the work of the nature needed to drive the evaluated process or product. Going to our framework, that is LEAF, LCA and EMA applied framework. It is a synergetic calculation, evaluation, and analysis of results. It's a useful tool to focus on energy, materials, and environmental improvement options. The framework is divided in 3 steps. The first one is an ex-ante LCA analysis to identify the burdens of the process and define feasible solutions, what we call here scenarios. The second step is to evaluate the environmental, is to make an environmental assessment of the proposed solutions in the first step that are trying to diminish the burdens that we identified before. And the third step is the validation, where when we assess with another LCA, ex-post LCA, to verify that the burdens we identify were actually diminish it. Moving forward, this is our investigated system. As you can see, all the inputs from outside our system. It starts with the fodder production that produce feed for the livestock. The livestock produce milk for the cheese making, but also manure that is used as a circular pattern, used as fertilizer for fodder production. The milk enters the cheese making phase to produce not only mozzarella cheese, our focus here, but also other types of cheeses. And it's impossible to produce any cheese without producing whey, for example, and without producing manure or sewage. So here I forgot to show you that whey is also used as feed from livestock, another circular pattern. But it's important to, please understand that complex systems are hard to be evaluated because we cannot produce one without another, and a single method evaluation maybe cannot identify or properly evaluate that. So at the end of, as final outcome of our literature review, we stated that a proper evaluation of dairy supply chain is still required to overcome the limits of a single method approach and explore multiple sustainable perspectives that will be consistent with the complexity of the investigated system and complexities related to multiple outputs. Going to our results, the first step, so it's an ex ante LCA. And at this point, as a standardized procedure, to interpret the results in LCA, we need to allocate the impacts, the burdens. In our case, we chose exergy allocation related to the physical option. Could be physical, economic as allocation, and also be system boundary expansion. But we chose the exergy allocation. And all results, when we are talking about, when I show you buffalo mozzarella results, means that 48% of the impacts are attributed to mozzarella cheese. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you now. The LCA show us, as you can see here in pink or maybe red, the electricity as the first one, the raw milk as the second one, and the other two, the green and the blue, are nitric acid and sodium hydroxide that is related to the cleaning process. Okay, so as burdens, as hotspots in this in the buffalo mozzarella of our evaluated system, we found electricity, raw milk, and cleaning process, cleaning products. Raw milk is important, so we went there to zoom in and evaluate the raw milk procedure. When we enter the livestock phase, the milk production, we also find here in yellow the electricity, but the next ones will be straw, mineral feed, wheat, oats, sorghum, corn, alfalfa, and loyeto. That they all come from the fodder production. As we talked to the administration, to the management of this factory, and they told us that any change on the feed could change the productivity of milk, we decided to not focus on that, even if the impact is huge, but focus on the, where is it? Here. From the mozzarella cheese production, the overall average contribution, it's 43% for detergent, so sodium hydroxide and nitric acid. And from milk production, we will think how to improve the electricity hotspot. Disregarding, as I told you, the fodder production that will be responsible for 24% of the impacts. So our solutions and scenarios with our board of experts, we decided to, as a technological improvement scenario, working with automated cleaning process. It's called SEERC. in food industry. And the second is to face the electricity in an eco-efficient perspective that will replace the fossil fuel generated energy for renewable alternatives, electricity from renewable sources. But we found another opportunity to discuss methods and the integration of methods. So based on different allocation procedures, we proposed and discussed crucial methodological issues. This viewpointing scenario, I'm going to talk about it now. It starts as business as usual, using the usual algebra, Emergy algebra, so no allocation procedure to co-products. And the most common procedures in LCA, as I told you, could be economic or physical allocations such as mass, energy, or exergy. Then we test the validity of the allocation process of LCA in EMA calculations. At this point, I should tell you, please don't do it. EMA calculations doesn't support, or it's wrong. I can tell you it's wrong to do allocation in EMA, but we did it and we discussed it in this paper with a lot of we were careful to reach our goal. I'll tell you at the end. But the BAU scenario is in the 30 scenario. The BAU one is no allocation procedure. The second one is economic allocation that can be in its standardized procedure in LCA, also applied to EMA, and also exergy allocation, that was the one we chose to work in our LCA evaluation, also applied to EMA. Here in this table, I show you how it works in our co-products and our complex system. So if I think about economic allocation, the buffalo mozzarella, thinking about the production, the total production annual, and the value of the production, will account for 79% of the results. The interpretation of results will input to the mozzarella 79% of all impacts. But we cannot produce mozzarella, as I told you, without producing whey, manure, or carcass, for example. And in the economic point of view, in our case, it's a circular pattern, but they can also, they actually are, if they are not circular processes, you should pay for it. So you cannot, the economic allocation cannot see these products as co-products, as byproducts, so it's just waste. On the other hand, if we go to the exergy allocation, that is, exergy means energy available to produce work, the manure is the one with most, the highest percentage of exergy. And our buffalo mozzarella, just almost 10% of the total final results. Showing this, we are going to do our second phase, that is the environmental assessment of the solutions, to evaluate the feasibility of the scenarios we proposed. And here, in the buffalo mozzarella, we can see the BAU scenario is the highest one in both, in U, total energy, and UEV. So we are talking about total resource consumption, and the resources use efficiency, okay? As you can see, the proposed scenarios, the proposed solutions as automated process, cleaning process, and substitution, replace the for renewable energy sources, are better than the BAU scenario. So, and also the allocation procedure show better results when we see the Emergy results. But please, we cannot do it. It's not right. What I want to show you is that here, even if the total U and the UEV show different results, when we analyze other Emergy indicators for the three scenarios on scenario 3, the three options showed the same results, which means that we haven't changed any procedure. The process, the evaluated process is the same. The allocation just change the results, but doesn't change the process. And without changing the process, we cannot improve it. Moving to our third phase, our third step of the LEAF procedure. It's an ex-post LCA is the validation. And here you can see the first black bar is our business as usual, the first scenario, the ex-ante one. And you have the scenario uno, scenario one, automated cleaning process. We have scenario two, that is renewable and electricity from renewable sources. And we have scenario three, that is the economic allocation. So if you think just on the first and the last bar, it's only related to allocation. We haven't done any improvement, and we also can see different results. And overall, the best, the scenario one is the best, that brings the best results in all impacted categories. So as conclusion, LEAF method is a multi-method and a multi-perspective evaluation of complex system that overcomes the limits of single method evaluation, essential for a comprehensive environmental assessment towards sustainability. Scenario one showed the best environmental performance as it provides savings in water and cleaning products, but also automation cleaning process provide new knowledge to employees, coupled up to better labor conditions, translating as avoided chemical manipulation. Scenario two is also a successful option showed by the LCA ex-post, and showing that the use of renewable resources instead of fossil fuel-based products reduces the total burdens. The third scenario, it was the most complicated to explain and to write about it. It's a methodological discussion that underlined the restraint of single method appraising complex systems, allowed users to better and comprehensively understand how the allocation options can profoundly affect results, and how assumptions can bring different outcomes. That's it. Any questions or comments? Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, please, if anybody has any question, please put it in the chat or just speak out. Yeah, otherwise we are not receiving questions yet. Maybe we can go to Sanja's, the next presentation, and if there's anybody who still has a question, just
I have a question, Giuseppe.
Oh, please. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, no, just a question for Mariana. Not sure whether you can hear me well. It's about the integration of LCA and Emergy. Are you satisfied with the current integration you have achieved? Because as you know, this is one of the major objectives of the project, the integration between LCA and Emergy. Or is there something else that can be done to improve the integration of these methods?
First of all, yes, I'm happy, I'm proud of the results, but always we can move forward also in the integration of these two methods. We submitted another paper trying to improve the integration related to EMA. So there's a lot of, it's like an onion. So we can improve each method towards circular evaluation procedures, but the integration of them can be also improved and integrating more. Related to this two, I have plans and I should try a statistical approach to prove that they are really different, and that we are talking about different things, and that we need all of these indicators. Or maybe I'll show that they are all related and we need just a simple framework because they are all connected and correlated. So there's a lot of things to be done in the next year. Yes, thank you for your question, Andrea.
Thank you. I think this is a very good idea, especially, you know, the statistical analysis. Maybe you could try methods like factor analysis or principal component analysis to check whether these methods are telling you something really different, or in a way there is a lot of redundancy in the information that they are providing. In any case, the results will be interesting. So yeah, I think that is a very promising avenue to explore.
Thank you. The floor is yours, Sanja.
Thank you. So I think you can hear me, right? Let me just share my screen. Share. And okay, Joseph, is everything fine? I'll just put it full screen. I assume yes, right?
For now, it looks white.
Can you see the first slide?
It looks white. Can you press enter once?
Yes. No?
It looks all white.
Okay, sorry. That's weird. Okay, let me try again. Okay, maybe I will just share my whole screen and then see how it goes.
Oh, now we see it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. So, good afternoon, everyone from my side too. Thank you for joining this session. So in the next 20 minutes, I will present to you the two publications that we had together with my supervisory team. So the first paper is the short perspective paper that came out from a blog of mine that I wrote for the ReTraCE website regarding the EU Green Deal and whether it is going to contribute to spreading or concentrating more prosperity. This blog we wrote this paper, the perspective paper, was submitted to Resources Conservation and Recycling together with my supervisors, Professor Genovese and Professor Ketikidis, and we also had as a co-author Dr. Dimitris Korpakis. The second paper, which was published around the same time, was published in the Journal of Sustainability. It came out as an outcome from the second deliverable that we had in our work package. It was regarding the stakeholders, mapping and proposing a living constellation of stakeholders in order to implement regional circular economy policies. This paper was written together again with my supervisors, but also Dr. Solomon co-authored it, and Joseph also had his contribution in the paper. So yeah, let's move on the short paper, on the perspective paper, which with the title of the EU Green Deal Spreading or Concentrating Prosperity. This paper is basically anchored in the field of regional development policies, of territorial polarization, of regional convergence, development gaps, and these sort of things. So just to give you a bit of background on all these kind of concepts for those of you that are not familiar with. So the territory of the European Union, except being divided on countries, so member states, it is divided on subnational levels, so-called regions in 3 categories. And then this second level of regions, the NUTS2 regions, are categorized based on the regional GDP per inhabitant for different purposes, but mostly for allocation of funds and also policy targets. So these 3 groups, which are categorized again on the regional GDP per inhabitant, are more developed regions, which are where the GDP per inhabitant is more than 90% than the EU average for a certain period of time. Then we have the transition regions, which are sort of in the middle in terms of development. And then at the end, we have the less developed regions, which are, let's say, poor performing compared to the other two categories. So in our papers, we're sort of, the main question that we're asking is whether the EU sustainability agenda is going to bring these three groups closer or just increase this divergence that is between them. And we're mostly focusing in the second category, in this transition regions category, which is in the middle, which also it's quite an interesting area or topic for research from the side of scholars that are doing research in terms of regional development policies and these sort of things. Because literature shows that they have often-wise been overlooked by and neglected by policymakers. So a bit on the regional context. So many regions, these transition regions that are in the middle, have experienced prolonged periods of low growth or no growth or negative growth, combined with drop in industrial activities or increased unemployment. Maybe they have stated that they have reported some sort of a brain drain situations or outmigration issues, and they often-wise have been overlooked or neglected by policymakers since they have fallen between the cracks. So this is what we call regions that have fallen in development traps. They have been overlooked by policymakers because on the one side we have the more developed regions. Most of the times these are regions where the capital cities of the countries or the member states are located. So a lot of investment and public and private, so a lot of funds and policy is targeted and directed towards them on one side. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the really poor performing ones, and of course a lot of attention and funds investments is going also on them in order to sort of get them out of this low level situation. But then in the middle we have these transition regions which most of them have been there forever in this situation because of different reasons, and they often-wise have been neglected by policymakers. In these regions, the concept of or the notion of geography of discontent has also been reported, which is basically denoting the unhappiness and dissatisfaction of people which are living in these regions that experience development traps. So how it happened and how these regions ended up where they are. In many ways, so each region has its own story and way how they ended up in this, but which we discuss in the paper. But overall, it is a result of a lengthy process, so it didn't happen overnight, of places which were simply unable to integrate themselves into the global value chain. So modern globalization tendencies have basically concentrated all the production of wealth along very few globalized production hubs, like mostly the capital regions, which at the end of the day left out a number of places which were simply unable to catch up. So besides these economic reasons why they're in this position, there are issues from, I don't know, historical, social, geopolitical nature, which basically led to the regress of these regions because they shaped both the investment and non-investment trends. However, the issue is not whether at any particular point there will be a perfect, let's say, convergence, regional, and equality in the development of all these regions, because there will never be, and that's simply too much to ask, like it's just pure utopia. But rather the question is whether the economy and the current policy is contributing to spread the prosperity or to still concentrate it in the specific regions that I already talked. So up until now, we have been talking about the development issues, which in itself, it's a really complex issues to be tackled. And then if we add in the equation, the environmental policies, so the EU Green Deal, the Circular Economy Action Plan, the EU Climate Law, so the whole EU sustainability agenda, which of course is going to have an effect on the whole development issues. So we can definitely see that this will be indisputably a major challenge for the EU and really an uphill battle. In this paper, we are not sort of providing solutions, or we're not being prescriptive of what the EU should do, or sort of it's more of the nature of the paper, of the perspective paper, it's mostly to challenge and to raise as many questions and to be mostly skeptical about all these issues and to sort of give a bit of food for thought for the future. So that's it for the perspective paper. Now I move to the second paper, which is basically focused on the implementation of the circular economy on the regional level. And we are proposing some sort of a living constellation of stakeholders which shall be considered not only in the design process of the policies, but in the whole implementation of them. So, I mean, we all know that the transition towards the circular economy entails inevitably a transformative system-wide changes. And of course, that means includes the precondition of managing and finding ways to work across governmental levels, across territorial scales, across policy areas, and across sectoral boundaries, which means abandoning this sort of silo mentality or silo approach of work. So we have to find ways to work across different levels and boundaries. And equally important is also the broad and profound mobilization, involvement, but also alignment of stakeholders, because the government alone or these public authorities cannot simply implement the transition. In this paper, we are promoting the NUTS2 level regions, but also the role of local and regional authorities as the primary adoption level, which are basically on the front line of the change, and therefore they're a focal point of this transition. I think on many occasions in my previous presentation, I have already argued why I'm proposing this level of regions, but so I didn't want to revisit that again here, but if you want, we can discuss it later. However, academic contributions in terms of that, so scholars are not really many contributions are not focused on this level, so on the role of regions on the regional level, but also the role of local and regional authorities. And so there is scarce of research on how to best achieve this. And also there are no models that have been developed to sort of identify and mobilize these relevant stakeholders in order to implement the circular economy policies at the regional level. So linked questions which are quite important are still unanswered. So who are the stakeholders groups? How are we involving them? How are we mobilizing them? How are we aligning their views just to make sure that we are all going into the same direction? What are the barriers and obstacles that each one of them can encounter? How are they interacting among themselves? Like what are their roles and so on and so forth. So this paper, of course, is not answering all of these questions, but it's basically setting the baseline or the foundation to start and unveiling all these important questions which need to be researched and answered in the future. Basically, the main aim of the paper is to identify an inclusive and permanent coalition of stakeholders to act as a living constellation in the process of the circular economy implementation, and also to propose a method of designing some sort of platforms that will ensure the inclusion and engagement of different groups of stakeholders throughout the transition process at the regional level. So in simple words, it just means we are not just creating a model that will sort of map of, okay, these are the stakeholders that we need them in order to design the policy, but who are the stakeholders that need to be permanently engaged throughout the process, not just in the design of the policy, but throughout the implementation and adjustment process of the transition. So basically, this is the research design for developing the model. The model that we're proposing, I will introduce it in the next slide, is the circular economy quintuple helix model. And this is basically the method of how we developed it and how we came into it. It has three main steps. So the first step is the conceptual research, where we set the conceptual boundaries of the model by selecting underlying premises for to develop the model. Well, basically what we did is we tried to identify and to argue all these premises that we should consider when designing the model. So we have issues like the need for a multi-stakeholder platform, the multi-level framework, the need for cooperation, engagement, the balanced approach for implementation. But also we are considering approaches which are quite central and that are at the heart of the EU policy making so far, like a place-based approach or the smart specialization strategy. And also we're introducing the need to include the environment. And we are sort of arguing the inclusion of all these ones in the paper. In step 2, it's the desk-based research, where the focus was basically to identify studies that have developed some sort of innovation models to foster regional growth and promote entrepreneurship and innovation. So why innovation and why entrepreneurship, you might ask? Well, it's quite simple. The circular economy transition entails finding new products, finding new services, finding new business models, marketing, finding new ways to market. So it's all about innovation and the engine of entrepreneurship. Basically, there are 4 main studies and models that we have drawn and being inspired in developing our model. So it was, the first one is the traditional triple helix model. The second one is the public sector centered living club by Arnken et al. 2010. And the third one also, it's the citizen-centered quadruple helix model. And the last one, it's the quintuple helix model, where basically we have the 4 previous actors or helices, just including also the environment, so including this sort of spatial dimension inside the model. And in step 3, after we developed the model, it was a practice-oriented research, where we simply try to practically apply this model and proposed approaches in 2 regions. The first one was trying to map stakeholders which were engaged in circular economy activities in the region of Central Macedonia and Greece, and that's 2. And then the second one was the case of the Galician circular economy strategy in the region of Galicia in Spain. So this is basically the model. As you can see, it is basically built on the triple helix model, so built on the industry, environment, and academia nexus, therefore allowing the emergence of trilateral networks or hybrid organizations. This, in simple terms, means it's just organizations that cannot belong to one actor, but they are sort of in the middle of 2 or 3 helices, such as like incubators for entrepreneurship or accelerators, or maybe some sort of transfer centers, or this type of organizations. The model is definitely promoting a balanced approach of implementation, meaning it's not favoring the role of government over the role of academia or these sort of things. It's basically stating that the role of each stakeholder is equally important, and they all have the same responsibility and the same importance in the transition. It is ecologically sensitive model, which is suitable for driving socio-ecological transition. We're including the nature in the middle of the model, being the nucleus of the model and acting as a driver of innovation, which is triggering action and inspiring the action of the other helices. So it's not an actor which can have specific actions, but it's sort of inspiring and sort of guiding the actions of the other 4 helices. And that simply means that all actions and all activities which will be undertaken by the rest of the stakeholders must be true to nature, and they must acknowledge the effects and the impacts and the impact that it will have on the environment beforehand. And of course, it is recognizing the social dimension, since the civil society is also included in the model. Something new that we're also introducing is the concept of development or cooperation platforms, which was firstly introduced by Arnken et al. In 2010. So we're also adjusting that. The development or cooperation platforms is simply these intermediary type of organizations in the regional innovation systems that are basically doing the role of research, innovation, and development. So it's just sort of an intermediary bodies or organizations sort of thing. So first on this figure, we have our model, and then we have the 2 approaches that we're proposing to develop this platform. So the unilateral helix, which means just within one helix, and the multilateral within more than 2 helices. Yep. So, and here we are proposing 3 types of platforms. So the horizontal and vertical platforms, which are within one helix, therefore the unilateral approach. So on the right-hand side, top right corner, we can see an example of that within the government helix. For example, we have with the blue line an example of vertical or multi-level platform, where we have sort of an intermediate organization that is sort of bringing together authorities from a national level, from a regional, municipal, and local level, acting as an intermediary. Or with the red line, we have a platform which is bringing together and acting as an intermediary between regional authorities, so actors within the public sector, on the same level. And the last platform is the multilateral platform, which is basically bringing together actors from different helices and getting them together. And I think one of the most famous example of that is basically the European Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform, because it's sort of open to every type of stakeholder, and it sort of brings them together for exchange of knowledge, best practices, or cooperation possibilities, or these type of things. Next, what we did was basically to apply practically this model in the Greek case from the region of Central Macedonia. Basically, we took examples of Greek stakeholders which were engaged in one way or another in circular economy activities and try to sort of identify if they actually exist in reality. So here in this table, we have, for example, my research center, so SEERC, which is working definitely in providing and developing research in the field of circular economy. The government is basically the region of Central Macedonia, so the regional government. The industry example, it's this company which is working heavily in biogas in the whole region. A civil society example, it's this NGO, Let's Do It Greece, which is promoting environmental activities among citizens. An example of a hybrid organization is this Center for Renewable Energy Sources and Saving, which is sort of laying in between the public organization, the government organization, but also doing some sort of research and technology related activities. And then we have examples of development and cooperation platforms. So here in Greece, we have this association NPE, which is basically association of the 13 NUTS 2 level regions in Greece. An example of vertical or multi-level platform will be the CORE, or the European Committee of Regions, which basically is encompassing different municipal, local, or regional level of authorities and sort of voicing their importance and their significance to the other EU bodies. And then as an example of the multilateral platform is this group, which is the Cluster of Bioeconomy and Environment of Western Macedonia region, which again is based on the triple helix actors, but also it includes but also it considers the role of the civil society. Yeah, last slide. So what are the future research agenda, and what are the future pathways that we can follow? Stemming from this conceptual paper, of course, we can move on to investigate the different roles different stakeholder groups can assume. We can try to identify the different combinations of incentives or like stimuli that can trigger more circular economy activities from different stakeholders, or we can similarly identify the obstacles that each one of them are encountering and ways to tackling them. We can also move into determining ways to engage stakeholders, to stimulate action, cooperation, co-creation, participating, and also aligning their interventions in the circular journey into which Europe is heading. And of course, more practical applications could also help develop even more the model and the approaches by applying it into different regional contexts or even wider scenarios. So that's all from my side. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sanja. It has been a brilliant presentation. Is there any question?
Or maybe I can take them at the end, if whatever.
Or otherwise, can I just ask you, do you know with respect to the first paper, any example or known case of how a region can overcome this economic peripheralization? How can they overcome and stop being so peripheral in the economic system? Have you came across any case?
When you say they can stop being so peripheral, what do you mean? Just
when you have mentioned the three categories of regions, that there's mostly these peripheral regions, these regions that are more central in the supply chain, and then this middle ground. So are there many cases, or in general, can regions manage to come from one of these categories to another? Is there mobility?
Yeah. So as I said, each region, it's a different story for themselves. So, for example, some of these regions were once really, let's say, wealthy, and they had a really good development, let's say, or performance or growth or whatever, but because of XYZ reasons, they have stagnated their development, and then they have moved into this stage. Some of them were like just stuck in this, let's say, in this stage for forever, for years. Others of them were once like really poor performing, and then they started developing and growing. But once they reached this middle income, let's say, level, they just stopped growing, and again they were stuck there forever. So I don't know. I think it's sort of a debate in the academia right now, because some of them are proposing that we need to still focus on these place-based strategies, meaning that we just find what works for us and what are the advantages of the place that we are, of the region, and we just invest and work on that, and that will take you out from this development trap that you are. Or maybe others are proposing this new approach of place sensitivity policies, which are mostly, let's say, disregarding the place sensitivity approach, but they're mostly focusing on the social side, and to sort of take into consideration all these marginalized regions and territories, and develop the policy and the whole allocation of funds based on that. So I think that the newest, let's say, argumentations are mostly leaning towards this place sensitivity approach, if I may say.
Yeah, thank you very much. Is there anybody else's question, or can we jump to Tommaso's presentation? Yeah, I guess the silence is that we can go to your presentation, Tommaso. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so let me see if I am presenter. This. Okay. Okay. Can you see? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So, hello again, everyone. Today I will present my paper, which has been published recently. The paper is an empirical analysis I've done in the first year of my PhD, which started as a very descriptive and exercise, but to which we've added some theoretical interpretation, and which has been very useful to define the path of my PhD. So the title is The Adoption of Circular Economy Practices in Supply Chains, an Assessment of European Multinational Enterprises. So to introduce quickly the concept of circular economy, if there is someone that which is not clear. So in a circular economy, products are designed for longer life, for being reused, manufactured, and recycled. Materials are kept in these ways in the economic system, reducing the need of extracting and processing primary resources. A circular supply chain is a network of enterprises which cooperate to deliver products and also to reincorporate these products and materials at the end of their life. So we all know that multinational enterprises, operations and supply chains are responsible directly or indirectly for most of the environmental damages that we are facing today. This is because they have operated for decades through very linear supply chains. So nowadays, they are looking with interest into the circular economy paradigm and circular economy practices in order to reduce their environmental impact and create values for their customers and societies. However, we don't know the actual extent to which these organizations have already operationalized these principles in their supply chains. So, looking quickly at the literature, what we know is, looking at the literature that focus on listing drivers, reasons, barriers of adoption of circular economy practices in supply chains, not only circular economy, but also sustainable and green practices, we saw that institutional pressures play a key role to explain why certain practices are adopted and others not. We also saw that if we look at the supporting mechanisms that are described also from the very rich qualitative research in circular economy research stream, we see that most of the these mechanisms like coordination, transparency of the supply chain, communication, quality and strategic alignment with suppliers and customers are related with the concept of supply chain integration. What we don't know is whether this is true in the context of circular supply chain management. These predictors have not been tested yet. Actually, a few papers have done that, but they focus on very biased samples of organization which are really at an advanced stage because of the ecosystem with which they cooperate. So for this reason, in this paper, we have tried to give an answer to the following research question: which circular economy practices have been adopted by European multinational enterprises and to what extent, and also what factors can drive or enable these initiatives, with particular reference to supply chain integration and institutional pressures. So what did we do? This paper is based mainly on secondary data. So it is for many reasons. First of all, this is an emerging approach in the circular economy literature. And for some research questions, this method is preferred to surveys which might have some problems of data dependability, especially on single respondents when the interviewees don't have a clear understanding of the whole supply chain process, and so on. Actually, the reliability of data is often a critique that is used raised against the use of secondary data. However, we think that this information that multinational enterprises are pushed to disclose are validated also by stakeholders which have also an interest to create problems to those organizations. And so if they disclose something that is not true, is not correct, they might cause them problems. So what we did is to create a database by coding information that were already available. Firstly, we extracted this information by reading the full reports. Then we classified this information into templates that we have also inductively and deductively improved. Finally, we have also translated this information in quantitative indexes in order to do a primary test of the effect of these factors on our variable. So overall, the sample included the manufacturing, the agri-food, the services, and the energy sectors. One thing I didn't say is that the sample of organizations have been selected by looking at the global Fortune 500 list. So the first result of this paper is that practices, circular economy practices, have been classified by type. So reduction, reduce, reuse, and recycle, and by level of implementation. So whether they are just at a conceptual stage or they are at a high level of implementation across the boundaries of organization and in the supply chain. What we noticed is that most of the practices are at a conceptual and early implementation stage, and across inside the same sector there was a very high similarity in terms of the practices adopted. Then, by looking more into the details, we noticed that companies seems to be at a different stage in the implementation. In this phase, we have assigned scores to each company in order to evaluate their approach. And in this slide, I've grouped the best and the worst performing company in the sample. We have assigned scores that, first of all, circular economy score represent is a function of the level of implementation, whether, as I said before, the practice is just a prototype or relates to a single product line, or if it's something that is widely implemented across geographical regions and product lines. Another improvement that we did following a review that we received from the journal is to distinguish between internal circular economy practices, so practices that focus only on internal activities, for example, improving the efficiency of some production lines, from distinguishing them from circular supply chain practices, so practices that showed the presence of the involvement of at least another supply chain actor. So the other two indexes were counting indexes that counted the number of internal and of circular supply chain practices. It is interesting to notice that if we look at the companies with the highest score, they belong to any sector, but if we look at the companies with low score, they belong mainly to the services sector, which presents a lowest level in average of implementation. After this, we have also looked at the reasons why companies are taking these actions. We recognize different types of benefits, economic, environmental, and social benefits, and we, drawing on institutional theories, we associated these drivers with isomorphic mechanisms. So coercive isomorphism, for example, could be associated to regulation, legislations, fines, or bans. In these samples, there are plenty of examples of these pressures. One of these, for example, is that many organizations have taken action to fight plastic waste pressured by the current European directive. Also, changes in the industry norm are another driver. If we look at new standards that have developed to close the loop of some materials like Aluminium Stewardship Initiatives, Global Battery Alliance, and so on, these standards have driven the adoption of some practices. And finally, even when normative or coercive pressures are absent, companies adopt circular economy practices by following the example of industry peers, and so looking for market opportunities or simply imitating each other's. Another finding has to do with supply chain integration. What we did is to measure the level of supply chain integration for each company. How? Well, we assigned a score from 0 to 8 on the basis of the presence in the report of all the supply chain items we derived from the literature, and we distinguish three classes of companies: companies with highly integrated supply chain, medium integrated supply chain, and low integrated supply chain, on the basis of their supply chain integration score. What we noticed is that highly integrated supply chains seem to have higher circular economy scores and higher number of circular supply chain practices. Of course, this process does not reflect the most rigorous way of measuring constructs. It's rather a more descriptive exercise to make use of the great amount of information we had. However, it is it in some way reflects what companies have published. What are the implications of these studies? Well, the analysis of the empirical cases helped us to put together a conceptual framework which makes reference also to the literature on the subject. Essentially, this conceptual framework describes the adoption of circular economy practices as driven by institutional pressures, and supply chain integration acts as a moderator. In a few words, the presence of high supply chain integration improves the strength of that relationship between pressure and adoption, while the absence of low integration acts as a barrier. Some limitations, well, what we acknowledge is that basing your analysis on secondary data is also a risk, because some companies might not share and communicate some of the practices, especially the most radical ones that might compromise their competitive advantage in the future. So a solution could be to triangulate this search with some third-party reports. So to conclude, these analyses have shown what is the level of implementation of the most important multinational enterprises in Europe. What we can take home as a message is that while every company shows the adoption of at least one circular economy practices, these practices have essentially a limited impact. They are quite isolated and small in comparison to the company, to the overall business activity. And also that supply chain integration seems to have a beneficial effect on practices adoption. So thank you, everyone. Happy to answer some questions on the paper if you have some.
Yeah, thank you very much, and congratulations, Tommaso. I've read this paper last week actually, and it was very good, and I think the results are very understandable and very well written. So is there anybody who has a question? Please, can you just put it on the chat and just speak out?
Just a final question. Can I?
Yeah, jump.
Say something? Okay. First of all, Tommaso, thank you for your very nice and interesting presentation. I have two questions, let's say two curiosities. The first one is how do you measure the concept of integration of the supply chain? If you have adopted some qualitative or quantitative criteria. And secondly, when since we are talking about you are facing the supply chain, if you are also considering the role that in the supply chains can play the suppliers from the point of view of the adoption of circular economy practices. Probably not all the entire network of the suppliers, but those of the first tier, for example, the more important, those that have a more strict relationship with the main customer, with the focal firms. Thank you very much for your answers.
Okay, no, thank you for your question. It's a very good question. So I didn't include it in the slide. However, I had a backup slide at the end. So in terms of how did we measure supply chain integration? We used the very established scales in the literature. In particular, it comes from Froelich paper from 2001, but also the IMMS, International Manufacturing Survey, has used it a lot. So there are 4 dimensions for suppliers, 4 items for suppliers integration and for customer integration. Actually, here I show only the suppliers, and so it's about sharing informations. It's about developing collaborative approaches, joint decision making with suppliers and customers, and system coupling. As I'm showing here, in the first iteration, we have transformed the text in keywords, and in the second one, we have transformed the keywords in binary variables. So yeah, using a scale from 0 to 8. Yeah, as I was saying, it's mostly an exercise for the moment. However, this is what we did. For what concerns the second question, the role that suppliers have in pushing the adoption of practices, yeah, this is true. And what I can say about it is that in the sources, corporate sustainability reports, you would find also some collaborative projects that include also, for example, first-tier suppliers. And if this organization believes that it's useful to share certain information on the relationship between them and their suppliers, even also if they are related to some circular economy practices, they can do it. Another option could be to look also at the main suppliers and see both the sustainability reports to see whether there is some correspondence. I've not done this yet, but I don't know what is your idea about that, Renato.
My not a precise idea, but the story is that, of course, there is a lot of pressure between suppliers and the customers in function of, based on the different bargaining power of one of those actors. So one can push the other, one can press the other to adopt some circular economy practices. If, for example, the customers has this kind of tools in his own strategies. So it's important to understand who is the one that push and who is the one that able to complain, able to adopt the required strategy. So this is just a point of view that can affect the adoption of a more rapid, more consistent, more integrated circular economy, circular supply chain. That's all, Tommaso. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much.
There is a comment from Mari. Can you zoom in your slide?
This one? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, now.
Yeah, thank you. When he made a presentation, it was possible to read. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
If there is that, just a small question. Did you have a chance to observe whether because you are observing companies that are global integrated and are multinational companies mostly. So I assume that those are globally oriented companies, not only within the European Union. Did you have any chance to observe differences between countries on how these companies perform? Because I had the experience in talking to companies. There was a case of a producer of appliances, and they were producing good quality appliances, and those were durable products, but their production in the European Union, because of regulation, was much more durable of what they produced in South America or India, although they tried to have repairable products and to have products that will last long, so they will produce less of an environmental impact. It was different within the same company across territories. And did you have a chance to observe such things in your case?
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting. Actually, for example, one example I can remember is that in the agri-food supply chain, these very huge chains of supermarket, if we compare among British organization to French ones, we could see that French ones have very high circular economy score because following a certain regulation that banned waste from supermarkets, they were pushed to adopt a wide range of practices. Another example, which is not about this paper, but yeah, it's a similar analysis I'm doing with Azar. You can clearly see how the reverse supply chain of house appliances is different from country to country. Yeah, but coming back to this paper, other examples. Okay. Yeah, but you can see if you look at different companies in different locations, you can see different pressures, different way of reporting also practices. Sometimes also different vocabulary. In fact, to homogenize the wordings, it took a bit of time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Brilliant. Is there any other question from anybody else?
I cannot see you anymore, but can I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Unless there's
Okay.
anybody
I could not.
So yeah, I see no more questions so far. So yeah, I guess that's the end of the webinar. So again, thank you very much, both Tommaso, Mari, and Sanja, for your excellent work and for getting published. So congratulations for that. And yeah,
Thank you, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Gently sharing, Joseph.
Thank you, everybody, and for your clear and interesting presentation. So see you soon. Hoping see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.